Stumbling on Happiness, by Daniel Gilbert. Introduction. On November 11, 1887, a man named Adolf Fischer stood on a gallows in Chicago. He was about to be executed for a crime he did not commit, a casualty of a political battle he had fought and lost. The crowd expected fear, or anger, or perhaps a final, desperate plea for his life. Instead, as the rope was placed around his neck, he surprised everyone with his last words, "This is the happiest moment of my life." And then, he was gone. Now, travel forward in time about 45 years. March 14, 1932. George Eastman, the brilliant inventor of the Kodak camera and one of the richest, most beloved philanthropists in the world, sat at his desk. He had succeeded in every way a man could. He had changed the world, built an empire, and given away a fortune to help others. He wrote a short, simple note, capped his fountain pen, and then took his own life. Here we have two men. One, a failure in the eyes of the world, facing a brutal, unjust death, claims to be happy. The other, a towering success, blessed with wealth and adoration, chooses to end his life. And this presents us with a profound puzzle. We all believe we know what makes for a good life. We strive for success, wealth, and freedom. We avoid failure, poverty, and injustice. We spend our entire lives steering our ship toward the futures we believe will make us happy. But what if we're pointing the ship in the wrong direction? What if our map of happiness is fundamentally flawed? This is the central question explored in the brilliant book, Stumbling on Happiness, by Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert. This isn't a self-help book that gives you a 5-step plan to a better life. It's something far more valuable. It's a revelation. It pulls back the curtain on the machinery of your own mind and shows you why your brain, the very tool you use to imagine your future, is so spectacularly bad at predicting what will actually make you happy. By the end of our journey today, you will understand the 3 great illusions your mind creates when you try to look into the future. You'll see why you misremember your past, misperceive your present, and misimagine your tomorrow. And most importantly, you'll discover a simple, almost unbelievable method for predicting your own future happiness with more accuracy than you ever thought possible. So, let's begin this exploration, not into what happiness is, but into why we are so often wrong about where to find it. Book summary. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Of all the creatures on this planet, we are the only ones who spend so much time thinking about the future. A squirrel buries a nut for the winter, yes, but it doesn't contemplate its retirement plan. It's acting on instinct, a program triggered by the shortening of the days. But you and I, we live in the future. We make sacrifices today for a tomorrow we hope will be better. We give up the cookie now for the beach body later. We sit through boring classes for the fulfilling career down the road. This incredible ability to think about the future, to project ourselves into elsewhere, is perhaps the greatest achievement of the human brain. And it's made possible by a specific part of your brain called the frontal lobe. It's the last part of the brain to evolve, the slowest to mature, and it acts as your own personal time machine. To understand its importance, consider the strange case of Phineas Gage. Back in 1848, Gage was a railroad foreman who had a terrible accident. An explosion sent a 3.5-foot iron rod shooting up through his left cheek and out the top of his skull, taking a big chunk of his frontal lobe with it. Miraculously, he survived. He could walk, talk, and work. But something was profoundly different. He had lost his ability to plan, to imagine his future. He became, as scientists would later describe it, bound to present stimuli. He was trapped in the now, living in a world without later. Without a frontal lobe, we are all Phineas Gage. We lose the ability to worry about tomorrow, yes, but we also lose the ability to plan for it. And this reveals the first big reason why we spend so much time thinking about the future. We want to control it. We believe that if we can just see the different paths ahead, we can choose the one that leads to the sunniest destination. We are the ape that looked forward, convinced that our foresight allows us to shop for the best possible fate. But this is where our journey truly begins. Because as Daniel Gilbert reveals, the tool we use for this shopping, our imagination, is deeply and systematically flawed. Our vision of the future is not a clear window, but a distorted lens. And it suffers from three great illusions that cause us to stumble, again and again, on our path to happiness. The first of these is an illusion Gilbert calls realism. When you remember an event from your past, say, your last birthday dinner, it feels like you're pulling a photograph out of a mental album. But you're not. Your brain doesn't store complete recordings of your experiences. That would take up far too much space. Instead, it stores a few key details, like a tough steak, a snotty waiter, or a surprise guest, and then, when you ask to remember, it reweaves the tapestry from those threads. It fabricates the rest. And it does this so quickly and seamlessly that you have no idea it's happening. This is what Gilbert calls the filling-in trick. Scientists have shown this in countless experiments. In one famous study, people were shown a video of a red car approaching a yield sign. Later, they were asked a misleading question. Did another car pass the red car while it was stopped at the stop sign? When they were later shown two pictures, one with a yield sign and one with a stop sign, a huge majority of them confidently remembered seeing the stop sign that was never there. The question had changed their memory. Your brain does this not just with memory, but with perception too. Right now, in the back of your retina, there is a blind spot where your optic nerve connects to your eye. There are no visual receptors there. You cannot see anything that falls in that spot. So why don't you see a black hole in your field of vision? Because your brain makes a reasonable guess about what should be there based on the surrounding information, and it just fills it in. You don't see reality. You see a beautifully edited, filled-in version of reality that your brain serves up for you. And here's the crucial connection. Just as your brain fills in your perception of the present and your memory of the past, it does the exact same thing when you imagine the future. If I ask you to imagine having spaghetti for dinner tomorrow, what comes to mind? It's not an abstract concept of spaghetti, is it? No. Your brain instantly serves you a particular plate of spaghetti. Maybe it's the kind your mom makes, with thick meatballs. Maybe it's a fancy basil rosemary pasta from your favorite Italian restaurant. You imagine it, and then you predict how much you'd enjoy it. But your prediction is based entirely on the specific details your brain just invented. What if the actual spaghetti you get tomorrow is from a can? Your prediction will be wrong, not because you're bad at knowing what you like, but because you made a prediction about one future and ended up living another. We do this constantly. We accept a party invitation, imagining a lively gathering with good music, and then feel disappointed when it's a quiet affair with a bored harpist. We predicted our feelings based on a mental image that our brain filled in, and we never stop to consider that the details were pure fiction. This is the first half of the illusion of realism, the filling-in trick. The other half is the leaving-out trick. Sherlock Holmes once solved a case by paying attention to the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. The police inspector was confused. "The dog did nothing in the nighttime," he said. "That," replied Holmes, "was the curious incident. The dog didn't bark, which meant the intruder was someone the dog knew." Holmes solved the case by noticing what wasn't there. Our brains are terrible at this. We are wired to notice the presence of things, but we are mostly blind to their absence. And when we imagine the future, we leave out crucial details without even realizing it. This is a phenomenon called focalism. We focus on the one event we're imagining and forget about all the other things that will also be happening in our lives at the same time. Think about the myth that people who live in California are happier than everyone else. When you hear the word California, what do you imagine? Sunny beaches, beautiful weather, giant redwood trees. You focus on these wonderful things. But you leave out the traffic, the high cost of living, the earthquakes, and the fact that Californians still have to do laundry, pay taxes, and get stuck in supermarkets, just like everyone else. Climate is only one small part of a person's life, but because we focus on it and leave out all the other details, we overestimate its impact on happiness. The truth is, Californians are no happier than anyone else. This leaving out trick leads us to make one of our biggest predictive errors. We overestimate the emotional impact of future events, both good and bad. When college students are asked to predict how they'll feel a few days after their team wins or loses a big game, they imagine the elation of victory or the devastation of defeat will last for days. But they're wrong. Why? Because they forget that a few days after the game, their happiness will also be influenced by chemistry exams, parties with friends, and whether or not the cafeteria is serving mystery meat again. They focus on the one event and forget that life is a tapestry of many events. This is why we can be so wrong about tragedy. When sighted people imagine being blind, they focus only on the absence of sight. They don't imagine all the other things a blind person's life is about: listening to music, going on picnics, paying taxes, falling in love. Because their imagined future leaves out all these other details, they drastically mispredict how satisfying such a life can be. So, that's the first great illusion: realism. Our imagination is like a hasty portrait artist, filling in some details from its own assumptions and leaving out others entirely. And because we don't see the artist at work, we mistake the portrait for a photograph. The second great illusion is what Gilbert calls presentism. This is the unavoidable tendency for our predictions about the future to be contaminated by how we are feeling in the present. You know this one from experience. Have you ever gone grocery shopping when you were hungry? You probably came home with a cart full of junk food you didn't need. Why? Because when you are hungry, it's incredibly difficult to imagine a future moment when you won't be. Your present hunger colors your vision of your future desires. Or think of the vow I'm sure we've all made after a huge Thanksgiving dinner. As you lie on the couch in a food coma, breathing shallowly because your lungs have no room to expand, you mutter, "I'll never eat again." In that moment, the feeling of being stuffed is so overwhelming that you genuinely can't imagine ever wanting to feel the sensation of hunger again. And yet, you probably eat again that very night. This happens because of a brain policy Gilbert calls reality first. When you try to imagine how you'll feel in the future, your brain first generates a feeling in the present. He calls this pre-feeling. If you imagine eating a pizza, you get a little flicker of pleasure right now, and you use that flicker to predict the bigger pleasure to come. It's a clever trick. But the problem is, your emotional brain regions are already busy reacting to whatever is happening in the real world right now. And reality always gets priority. In one clever study, researchers called people on sunny days and on rainy days and asked them how satisfied they were with their lives as a whole. The people who were called on sunny days reported being significantly happier with their lives. Did they have better lives? No. Their brains were reacting to the real weather outside, but they mistook that feeling as their answer to the question about their imagined life. Their present feeling was projected onto their global judgment. This is why, when you're in a bad mood, it's hard to imagine that you'll ever enjoy a party. Your current gloominess leaks into your prediction of the future. You're not really imagining the future party, you're just experiencing your present mood and attributing it to the party. Presentism also messes up our choices through another route: comparison. The value of something is rarely absolute, it depends on what we compare it to. You would probably drive across town to save $50 on a $100 radio, but you wouldn't do the same to save $50 on a $100,000 car. $50 is $50, but its subjective value changes with the comparison. The problem is, the comparison we make now, when we are imagining a future, is often not the comparison we will make later, when we are living it. When you are shopping for new speakers, you compare the big, boxy ones with the small, sleek ones in the store. The big ones sound noticeably better, so you buy them. But when you get them home, you never again compare their sound to the speakers you left at the store. Instead, you compare their awful boxiness to your beautiful, elegant furniture every single day. The comparison that drove your decision in the present is not the comparison that determines your happiness in the future. This brings us to the third, and perhaps most fascinating, illusion: rationalization. Let's go back to those surprising stories from the beginning. Why do people who have been through terrible experiences, public humiliation, unjust incarceration, even paralysis, so often claim that their lives were actually enhanced by the tragedy? It seems unbelievable to us as we imagine it. But that's because we fail to appreciate the power of what Gilbert calls our psychological immune system. Just as your physical immune system fights off bacteria and viruses, your psychological immune system defends your mind against unhappiness. It's a system of unconscious cognitive processes that help you change your view of the world so you can feel better about the world in which you find yourself. It does this by cooking the facts. When an experience happens to you, especially a negative one, your brain gets busy looking for a way to see it in a more positive light. Because experiences are complex and ambiguous, there are always multiple ways to view them. Your immune system helps you find the view that is both positive and credible. This is why, after you buy a toaster, you suddenly think it's the best toaster ever made. It's why gamblers are more confident that their horse will win after they've placed the bet than before. It's why voters are more positive about their candidate after they've cast their vote. Once something becomes ours, our choice, our experience, our fate, our immune system gets to work finding ways to love it. Now, here's the key: this process is almost entirely unconscious. We have no awareness that our brains are doing this. We don't feel ourselves cooking the facts, we just taste the delicious meal that results. And because we are unaware of this psychological immune system, we fail to predict that it will kick in when bad things happen. When we imagine a future tragedy, we imagine the initial shock and pain. Period. We don't imagine the unconscious process of reframing and rationalizing that will soften that pain over time. This ignorance leads to some strange paradoxes. For instance, our psychological immune system, like a national defense system, is triggered by big threats, not small ones. A broken pencil is annoying, but it doesn't pose a major threat to your well-being, so your immune system doesn't bother with it. A failed marriage or a lost job, however, is a full-scale assault, and it triggers a powerful defensive response. The paradoxical result is that we can sometimes recover more quickly from a major trauma than from a minor annoyance. You might forgive a spouse for a huge transgression but stay miffed for years about their habit of leaving dirty socks on the floor. The big event triggers your defenses, which help you find a way to make peace with it. The small annoyance flies in under the radar, never triggering your defenses, and thus it irritates you forever. Because we don't know this, we mispredict that bigger problems will always cause more lasting misery than smaller ones. Another trigger for our immune system is inescapability. We are more likely to find a positive view of a situation when we are stuck with it. In a wonderful study, photography students were told they could keep one of their 2 best prints. Some were told their choice was final. Others were told they could change their minds for several days. Who was happier with their photo? The ones whose choice was final. When the decision was inescapable, their psychological immune system got to work, finding all the wonderful things about the photo they had chosen. The students who could change their minds, however, kept comparing the two, focusing on the flaws of their choice and the virtues of the one they'd left behind. Freedom, it seems, is the enemy of rationalization. Yet, if you ask people, they will almost always say they prefer to have the freedom to change their minds. We don't realize that the very freedom we seek can undermine the natural processes that would otherwise lead to our satisfaction. So, we're in a bit of a pickle. Our imagination makes systematic errors of realism and presentism. And it fails to account for the powerful, unconscious workings of our psychological immune system. Experience doesn't seem to fix this, because our memories of how we felt are often just as flawed as our predictions. And the cultural wisdom we receive is often just a set of super-replicating false beliefs, like the ideas that money and children are guaranteed routes to happiness, that persist not because they are true, but because they help societies perpetuate themselves. Is there any hope? If our own minds can't be trusted, what can we do? Gilbert offers a solution that is as simple as it is powerful, and as effective as it is unpopular. The best way to predict how you'll feel in the future is not to imagine it. It's to find someone who is currently in the situation you're contemplating and ask them how they feel. He calls this using others as surrogates. This sounds too simple, right? Your first objection is probably, but I'm special, I'm unique. How another person feels won't tell me how I'll feel. We all believe we are as unique as our fingerprints. But this belief in our own uniqueness is largely a myth. Yes, we are different in the details. You love ballet, I love baseball. But underneath those surface-level differences, our emotional reactions to major life events are far more similar than we think. Gilbert and his colleagues tested this idea directly. In one experiment, they had one group of people simulators use their imagination to predict how they'd feel after a certain experience. They had another group surrogators make the same prediction, but they weren't allowed to use their imagination. Instead, they were simply shown a report of how another randomly chosen person felt after the exact same experience. The results were stunning. Time and again, across different situations, the surrogators made far more accurate predictions about their own future happiness than the simulators did. By relying on the real, live report of a single, random stranger, they were able to avoid all the errors and biases of imagination. They were essentially getting a direct report from their own future. And yet, when people are given the choice between using their own imagination and using a surrogate's report, they overwhelmingly choose imagination. We reject the single most effective tool we have for predicting our future happiness. Why? Because we don't believe we are like other people. We think of ourselves as special, unique, and different. We are so convinced of our own individuality that we would rather trust our own flawed, biased, and error-prone imagination than the honest report of a fellow human being. The irony is profound. The best information is right there, in the people all around us, but we're too busy looking inside our own heads to see it. Commentary. So, what do we do with all of this? It can feel a little disheartening, can't it? To learn that the one guide we've always trusted, our own mind's eye, is so often leading us astray. But I don't think that's the real message of stumbling on happiness. The message isn't one of despair, it's one of profound humility and unexpected opportunity. We live in a world that our ancestors could only dream of. For the first time in history, we have an incredible amount of freedom to choose our own lives, where to live, what to do, who to love. Our happiness is, in a very real sense, in our own hands. The great project of our lives is to use this freedom to make choices that will bring us satisfaction. And this book reveals that the primary tool we use for this project, our imagination, is unreliable. It's like trying to build a house with a bent ruler and a crooked level. The power of Daniel Gilbert's work is that it doesn't just tell us our tools are broken, it shows us exactly how they are broken. And once you understand the illusions of realism, presentism, and rationalization, you can begin to account for them. You can't make the illusions go away? You'll still feel like California is a happier place, and you'll still think that freedom to change your mind is always a good thing? But you can learn to be skeptical of these feelings. You can learn to question your own intuition. So, how can you apply this in your own life, starting today? Here are a few simple ideas. First, become a humble observer of the present. The next time you face a big decision, choosing a college, deciding on a career path, even picking a vacation spot, don't just rely on your imagination. Your imagination will serve you a glossy, airbrushed brochure. Instead, find people who are living that reality right now. If you're thinking of becoming a lawyer, don't just imagine dramatic courtroom scenes. Talk to a third-year associate at a law firm. Ask them what their Tuesday was like. Ask them how they are feeling today. Their real, present experience is a much better predictor of your future than your imagined one. Second, distrust the tyranny of the detail. When your imagination serves up a vivid picture of a future, whether it's wonderful or terrible, remember that it's just a sketch. Ask yourself two powerful questions. What important details am I leaving out of this picture? And what details am I putting in that are just my brain's best guess? This simple act of questioning the image can help you remember that the future is almost always more complex and more moderate than your imagination makes it seem. And finally, have a little more faith in your own resilience. You are tougher than you think. Your psychological immune system is a powerful and loyal friend, but it works in the shadows. Because you don't see it working, you don't trust that it will be there for you. But it will. Understanding this should give you a bit more courage. It should free you up to take worthy risks. That job that seems scary, that relationship that feels like a leap of faith. You might just find that even if you stumble, you have an incredible capacity to get back up, dust yourself off, and find a new way to see the world that makes it a pretty good place to be after all. That was a summary of Stumbling on Happiness by Daniel Gilbert. We've certainly covered the main ideas today, but I have to be honest with you, a summary is like looking at a travel poster of the Grand Canyon. The real, breathtaking experience happens when you stand at the edge of it yourself. The true magic of this book is in the way Gilbert's stories and experiments slowly unravel your own assumptions, letting you see the workings of your own mind with a clarity you've never had before. This summary is designed to give you a map. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about learning new facts, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the choices you make every day. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that these journeys are meaningful to you, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.